Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross. And joining me in the studio this evening is a regular guest, Sam Payton from Save Loch Lomond campaign. So welcome back to the programme, Sam.
Thank you for having me, Gordon. How are you doing this evening?
We're fine. So I'm just going to introduce our other guest for you tonight, and that's Ken MacDonald from iScot magazine. Welcome back, Ken.
Hello, Gordon. Good to see you.
Okay, well, I'm going to dive straight into the coronavirus update. Now, as of 2 p.m. today, a total of 381,471 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and the UK Government regional testing centres. Now, of these, 362,624 were confirmed negative. 18,847 were positive. There are now 66 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. There are 0 reported deaths of people who have tested positive today. This will be an underestimate of the number of cases. Not everyone with the virus will display the symptoms, and not all of those with symptoms will be tested. Of the people who have tested positive, 270 were in hospital last night, 4 of whom were in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by coronavirus COVID-19 infection remains at 2,491. This number only includes those who have died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. The latest UK daily figures available show that 46,413 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 49. This number refers to deaths in all settings and not just hospitals. Now, at this point, I just want to remind you that the programme has a live Twitter feed, and if you want to take part in the discussion tonight, you will see details of how to contribute on your screens shortly. Now to our first story this evening. The Aberdeen outbreak, and the latest COVID-19 reproduction number rises from 0.6 to 1. Speaking at the COVID media briefing today, the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, said that people in Aberdeen must observe the emergency lockdown rules, which ban non-essential journeys of more than 5 miles from home, and that includes not taking holidays in Scotland, the UK or overseas. Our advice to the people of Aberdeen is that you should not be going on holiday right now, either to other parts of Scotland or to other parts of the UK. We advise against overseas holidays in general for people right across Scotland, she said. We're also advising people outside of Aberdeen not to travel to the city for leisure purposes or to visit friends and family. The emergency lockdown was imposed yesterday after testing revealed a cluster of cases growing in Aberdeen over the weekend. The First Minister said that in addition to 25 new cases identified overnight, another 30 confirmed cases in the area were being investigated to see if they were linked to the outbreak. The number of the Aberdeen outbreak cases now stands at 79. The First Minister also reported that Scotland's COVID-19 R number is up. It is now believed to be between 0.6 and 1, up from 0.6 to 0.9. She's cautioning against complacency, saying, I do want to warn, and very strongly warn, against any shred of complacency. We have undoubtedly seen in recent days an increase in positive cases, and that increase might not yet be reflected in the modelling. This virus is very much still out there and circulating in Scotland. Now, Ken, if I could come to you first for your reaction to this. It's been a little bit of a surprise, I think, to many people, having thought that we had got through the first part of this of the COVID-19 crisis, to find that we are now running into another spike, albeit a local one in the northeast.
Well, it is the nature of the beast. I mean, I don't know how you can predict or model a situation where random events and random occurrences could bring people who are a carrier into a group of people that has a chance of contracting the disease. It's very difficult to model, and you can only predict, but there's no guarantees. It's just a guess or a best guess. Who knows what's happened? We know that Aberdeen is the oil centre of Europe, and there are a lot of people travelling from various parts of the planet to go there. Yeah. So it's just a matter of time before something like that actually happens.
Well, Well, I was going to say, Ken, it seems from, if you're reading the reports today in the press, that there is more than one, obviously more than one pub involved in this. I think it was something like 35 different establishments across the northeast who've been involved in this outbreak. So it's obviously a bit wider spread than we first thought.
Yeah, I mean, there was a football match, although it was played there recently. And I know that there are some football supporters that just like to travel to the area even though they can't get in because of locked doors. So who knows? I mean, I have no idea what would have made it happen, but it's not unsurprising that these things will happen now and again.
Yeah. Okay, Sam, if I could come to you next for your comments. Were you surprised at the fact that an outbreak happened after the pubs reopened?
Oh, crikey. Not really, because the thing is when people have had a few drinks, they throw caution to the wind. We all know that.
Yeah.
And in general speaking, when people are out drinking, just the nature of our culture, they tend to go from pub to pub to pub. They don't, it's very rare that people just go to one pub and just sit there and have a drink. They tend to kind of visit various pubs in an area, or that's what happened when I was younger, in my pub days. So, I'm not surprised. I think it was going to happen. This was the test, and as Ken says, it's so hard to predict. It's this virus. The thing is, we can predict, we can do all the modelling, we can do all this, but at the end of the day, we don't really know. And it's a new virus, and there's so much we've still got to learn about it. And as we keep getting told, but no, I'm just surprised there hasn't been more kind of clusters in different areas. That's what I'm surprised at.
Sam, much of the response to the coronavirus has been about modifying the behaviour of large numbers of people, and one of those large sort of demographics is the young people, say sort of under 40, who go to the pub or went to the pub on a regular basis to socialise. Do you think it's because they're not actually taking this as seriously as they should?
Crikey, I don't know. I think in terms of, our kind of culture, we generally are quite a friendly culture, so we tend to, we've got, I don't know about you, Gordon, but I know very well myself and my friends, and, you tend to kind of hug people and things like that, and that's the hardest thing, and it doesn't matter what age you are, that just seems to be part of our culture, and I think that's the hardest thing about this virus, is when you see somebody and where you would naturally go up and give them a hug.
Yeah, or shake their hand or something.
We can't do that now. And if you've had a couple of drinks in you, the chances are, it doesn't matter what age you are, you're just going to go, it'll be fine this once, come and give me a cuddle,
Yeah.
So I don't think it's quite fair to put all the blame on the kind of youngsters. But at the end of the day, I think the youngsters, I know when I was young, you think you're invincible, you don't think it's going to happen to you, you think you'll be okay, and it's just trying to get that message across how serious this is. That's the difficult bit. That's the hard bit.
Yeah.
I know I get frustrated when one of my youngsters is really good and really, really cautious and really strict, and the other one, he's a bit in between, It depends on the situation. So, I think it's quite hard for them to grasp how serious this is.
You think it's actually very sort of counter to our natural instincts to behave in such an antisocial way, and that's part of the problem. What do you think, Ken?
I think
is it forcing us to go against our natural instincts?
It's not so much forcing anybody. This is, I think, where the mistake is. It's self-obligation to save your own life. Government can only just give as much guidance and give as much advice as possible, but we are responsible for taking care of ourselves. You don't need to tell folk you don't drink and drive. You don't need to tell folk that walking close to a beach head is a dangerous thing to do. Peer pressure is something that needs to be happening, especially to the young kids that think they are invincible, that they'll always dodge a bullet that they can't see. They're going to live forever.
Do you
And
think?
sadly, for peer pressure at that age, they're easily influenced when they see a group of people that don't wear masks or don't take precautions. And
Um,
I've found that, I think, Sam will tell us in Loch Lomond, with the amount of campsites that have been, been going on for the past couple of weeks, where big crowds of people
yes.
are having parties on the beachside. They won't learn that this thing doesn't just affect only poor, ill people. It affects everybody. And
Yes.
if you can only get into your head that pretend you are a carrier, whether you are or not, take precautions to protect everybody else, not just be selfish and think, well, I'm fine. It's, nobody
Yeah.
else is wearing a mask. What's the problem? We need peer pressure for young kids to make them be
Uh,
aware of what's going on with this disease. Again, we need to emphasise this is not a bad case of flu. This is a death
yes.
plague that needs to be respected.
There was, I read today a medical paper which was saying that there is a severe psychological condition which comes after COVID-19 in some cases, with people having nightmares about not being able to breathe and suffering panic attacks and anxiety and difficulty breathing long after they've actually recovered. So even if the disease isn't that serious, the breathing difficulties that it causes seem to cause lasting psychological damage to people. Anyway,
And
I'm
physical
going to
damage.
move on to our next story now, and we're going now to the European Union. The UK future access to the European Union financial markets is now in doubt. Now, the UK's future access to the European Union financial markets is looking increasingly in doubt as Brussels tries to limit the activities which can be carried out from London, prompting more businesses and more jobs to cross the channel. The City of London's unfettered access to its biggest customer, worth around £26 billion annually, ends on December the 31st, when the Brexit transition arrangements expire. While London is expected to remain Europe's biggest financial centre, with trillion-dollar foreign exchange trading and derivatives clearing staying put for now, recent moves by the EU to limit other trading activities to within the EU's internal market have dashed the finance industry's hopes of a wider agreement. Central to the argument is whether Brussels deems the UK financial rules equivalent or aligned with the EU's. Britain says that this should be straightforward, given that both sides have the same rules at the outset. But last month, Brussels said it wouldn't allow banks in London to offer wholesale investment services to EU investors, piling pressure on the city to shift more activity to continental hubs. Firms need to carry on doing their no-deal planning. It will make cross-border business outwards from the UK dependent on country-by-country analysis and is so complicated, said Jonathan Herbst, a financial services lawyer at Norton Rose Fulbright. Ken, let me come to you first with this story. This is one of the predicted problems that everybody could see coming when the Brexit vote first came in, that there were going to be severe difficulties for UK financial markets trading into Europe. Are you surprised by the findings here and by the comments coming from Brussels?
Absolutely not. I mean, the narrative since day one has been that they need us more than we need them. The German automobile industry is going to be champing at the door to prevent Merkel from ruining Brexit. None of this has come to pass.
Yeah.
And the best statement I can think of is that they're overconfident and underprepared. And we're talking about the Westminster in number 10. So they will always be overconfident and underprepared, and it will always be somebody else's fault.
Sam, if I could bring you in at this point, I know financial dealings is something I'm not an expert in, but what I was going to say is that the European Union obviously does not want a competitor on its doorstep. It wants somebody that it can work with. And the UK seems to be taking a position here that it wants to be a competitor. How on earth is this ever going to work?
Oh, it's not going to work, Gordon. I mean, I'm not a financial expert either, and it's not going to work. It's just, at the end of the day, we knew this was going to happen from day one, and at the end of the day, in order to be doing trade with other countries and things, there's regulations, there's things, there's standards and everything you need to have in place. There's deals that need to be done. Look what's happened with the fishing industry at the moment. That's no deal is just going to be so it's going to be a nightmare. It's literally going to be a nightmare. If Britain's put themselves on the outside of the UK government, but as Ken says, it's I don't know. I've got so many words going through my head, I can't even get them out. They have just made an absolute mess of things. They have made, and they thought that they've been smart and they've thought they've been on the ball and they're one step ahead when really they've been 10 steps behind the whole way.
Okay, Sam, thank you. Ken, if I could bring you back in here, I was just rereading this item, and for Brussels is now saying that won't allow banks in London to offer wholesale investment services to EU investors. Surely this is going to mean that many of London's banking centres are going to have to move into European cities. Otherwise, they just simply won't be able to do business.
Well, yeah, I mean, the European Union won't allow financial organisations to operate out with their internal rules and regulations. They'll have to have some form of compliance. And you can tell already from one of the Tory grandees, Jacob Rees-Mogg, he's transferred all his operations, I think, to Dublin to still be within the EU and to comply with the legislation that they've got. Yeah. So it's not. I'm not trying to be oversimplistic, but the fact that the UK thinks they can do anything anywhere without any issue, and they're now beginning to realise that this, England first attitude will not work in the modern day. They are like any other supplier of services. They provide currencies, no different from a butcher's or a baker's or whatever. They have a commodity to sell, and they have to work within the rules of the European Union, which sadly they believe that this restrains them in their ability to be the money laundering capital of the world.
Do you think, Ken, that the British negotiating position is disingenuous? Saying that they're starting out with the same rules as Europe is hardly a guarantee that it's going to stay that way, is it?
Well, no, we've got the money laundering aspects that the UK had to comply by this year, I believe, at some point. Yeah. And they obviously had an influence that they need to get out because they've got many overseas countries that are holding lots, trillions of pounds worth of assets. They don't want to be hindered by any rules or regulations. I mean, we were told throughout the Brexit process that Britain is a rule maker, not a rule taker, and this is just the thread that just runs through the whole financial industry. Frankfurt will do well. I see that Paris are trying to get their act together, but Britain will put up a fight along with the Americans to try and make London still stay that. But certainly I think there's going to be a lot more arguments to follow up, challenges for the British, I would say.
Yep. Okay, well listen, let's leave that there just now. Moving on to our next story. Now, a new report puts pressure on the UK government to step up energy transition efforts. The SNP's business and industry spokesperson has renewed calls for the UK government to set out targeted approach for the oil and gas sector for energy transition efforts, after a new report echoed key asks for investment and support made by the SNP. The report published today by Oil and Gas Authority, the OGA, set out recommendations for the UK government, including accelerating and enabling early energy integration projects and developing a number of individual CO2 stores in support of net zero targets. It went on to recommend that the integration of offshore energy systems, including oil and gas, renewables, hydrogen and carbon capture and storage, could contribute to deliver approximately 30% of the UK's total carbon reduction requirements needed to meet the 2050 net zero target. Earlier, the Scottish Government confirmed a £62 million energy transition fund to support businesses in the oil, gas and energy sectors over the next 5 years. The fund, with the focus on the North East, will look to strengthen the region's ambitions to help Scotland meet its ambitious targets on climate change. SNP MPs have repeatedly pressed the UK government at Westminster to deliver a sectoral support for Scotland's oil and gas sector, with funding towards the creation of a Just Transition Fund and in areas such as renewable energy and carbon capture, utilisation and storage. Commenting, Richard Thompson MP said, this new report by the Oil and Gas Authority sets out some key recommendations that the UK government must seriously engage with if we are to support our vital oil and gas sector and to push towards transition efforts. It is critical at this time, with the industry suffering a double blow from the hit to oil prices and the economic impact of the coronavirus, that the United Kingdom government takes heed of the report's findings and acts. Let me come to you first, Sam, just to change the order of things a little bit. But here we are with the Scottish Government again trying to find or trying to ask the UK government to take some action to push this programme forward away from or helping the oil and gas industry to transition onto low carbon or zero carbon energy. Are they going to get anywhere, do you think, with the Tory government in London in this effort?
You're asking me this question, Gordon. Basically, no, they're not. You know, at the end of the day, that's the problem. They need to ask permission. And this is always the issue, you know, with Westminster, you know, and that's where they've got us. We've got to ask permission, and including the oil and gas industry. And you're right, it has been had a double blow, especially with COVID and everything. Yeah. But the green environmentalist in me is very much about just transitioning into green energy. You know, stay away from the oil and the gas and the fossil fuels and things.
You would say.
Never mind. But never mind. I'm trying to stay away from that at the moment because that's not the question. But no, I just think it's ridiculous, and this is why, once again, we need to get away from instance that we've got to ask for permission to support industries and sectors within our own country, which is diabolical. We shouldn't be doing that in this day and age.
Okay, Sam, thank you. If I could come to you, Ken. Now, it's obvious to me, because I know people who work in the oil industry, that they've been needing some help for a while to transition away from, you know, offshore oil and gas to cleaner technologies. There's much has been made of the carbon capture idea, but how realistic is that? Surely the British government pooled the funding, did they not, on a project for that?
They did. I mean, carbon capture is a relatively new process that has to be defined and redeveloped. These things are constantly reviewed every other year, and the technology is getting better and better. I mean, wave capture was deemed to be something of a pipe dream, and now the technology and the expertise and the roadmap is getting better and better. Carbon capture was cut at the knees when an investment that we did, I think it was about couple of £1 billion to get it done, was denied by the UK government, saying it wasn't worth it at this time because they didn't think the technology was up to do it. But you have to keep experimenting with the technology to see how you can improve it, and improve it to make it better, and improve it to make it go full stream.
How does
Scotland has the...
I was going to ask you, Ken, how does carbon capture work? Just so our viewers can understand what it involves. My understanding of it is rudimentary, that you're taking the unwanted gases out of the exhaust, if you like, from a power station.
You just don't let it free access to the atmosphere, because obviously you get heating of the atmosphere, which causes global warming. Effectively, you're trying to contain the CO2 that you're producing by the process that you're using, and capturing it and storing it.
And how would they do that, Ken? How would they store it?
Well, there's probably chemical processes that can put it into some kind of solid matter that they can bury somewhere else, which is not radioactive, like we have with some of the radioactive waste that we bury it deep and far, far away, but it still has a potential threat. They try to make
it's normally, Gordon, stored underground.
I had heard that it was possible, at least possible scientifically, to turn carbon dioxide gas into a liquid, a cold liquid, and actually pump it down into redundant oil wells. I don't know if any work was done on that, was it?
Well, there's theory, there's a lot of theory, but these theories, to get them to become practical, have to be funded.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just design a perfect machine on a drawing board or on a CAD system and then suddenly say, you know, this is going to work. It will constantly be reevaluated, reassessed. When we think about it, when we started in '74 developing oil fields, many of these oil fields were abandoned because they couldn't extract any more oil. And through the process of the new pipelines and new drill bits and drill heads that they've got, and technology can make a drill head go sideways, they're now capturing more oil. So the final piece of the jigsaw is actually being able to capture the CO2 that's been generated by, well, at the time I think it was power stations, to make sure that none of this gets into the atmosphere and causes the problems that we're seeing with global warming. So a great idea to do it. Scotland's been full of innovative inventors that can find a way to make it work. But when your bank, which is the Treasury of Scotland, which is in London, says we're not going to fund it, there's not a lot you can do about that other than keep coming up with the ideas and hope that it gets funded at some point. Okay. So it's not for the want of trying, it's the ability of getting the funding to make it happen, which is the problem.
It all seems to come back to the fact that Scotland needs to be independent to do any of these things, doesn't it? Anyway, listen, I'd like to move on. Ken, sorry, what were you saying?
I was just going to say independence is normal. Independence is normal. It's just the case that there are plenty of independent countries that make daft decisions. And our neighbours across the pond regarding certain viruses are possibly one of them. They've got the resource to do it. Yeah. It's just using common sense and applying it and tackling the problem and come up with a solution is the hard part these days.
All right, thank you, Ken. Okay, we'll move on to our next story now. The death toll in Beirut and the explosion there has risen to 137 as the army has taken control of the blast site. Now, the death toll from a massive blast at Beirut's port has risen again to 137 as the Lebanese army took control of the site on the first day of a 2-week state of emergency. The new casualty figures on Thursday morning include at least 5,000 injured, and the Health Ministry spokesman said dozens were still missing. This toll is not final, he said. As volunteers worked with the army to clean up the damaged streets, buildings and hospitals, the government said that it had formed an investigation committee to look into the explosion, which appears to have been set off by 2,750 tonnes of ammonium nitrate, which was stored at the port since 2014. The French President, Emmanuel Macron, arrived in Beirut on Thursday, becoming the first world leader to visit since the disaster. He's pressing for changes to the political system, a major hurdle to receiving billions of dollars of aid to alleviate one of the worst financial crises in modern Lebanese history. Upon arrival, Macron said that the visit was an opportunity to have a frank and challenging dialogue with the Lebanese political powers and institutions. He said France would work to coordinate international aid, but he warned that if reforms are not made, Lebanon will continue to sink. French aircraft were among several, including others from Turkey, Germany, the Gulf countries and the World Food Programme, to land in Beirut since Tuesday, bringing rescuers, medical supplies and equipment. Now, Sam, let me turn to you first of all for your response to this. This seems to just be getting worse and worse, doesn't it? The explosion was bad enough, but now they have dozens of people still missing, and they're in a severe financial crisis because they're, as I remember recently, the Lebanese currency lost its value and hyperinflation had taken over. This is really just heaping the misery on people, isn't it?
Yeah, the problem is it's just absolutely heartbreaking, and it just goes to show you what high concentration of ammonium nitrate can do. And from what the reports that I was reading on this, basically there was a fire. It was started by somebody supposedly welding, and then it took hold, and then this happened. The problem, one of the biggest problems that's not getting mentioned on the media at the moment, is one of the gases, the byproduct of ammonium nitrate when it's combusted the way it has done, lets off a really, really nasty gas, and if that people breathe that in, that is highly dangerous. So have that on top of dealing with COVID and everything else. The fact that there was a grain storage there as well, it's just absolutely heartbreaking, and it just makes everybody kind of sit up and take, because every country, everybody needs to kind of sit back and go, right, how are we storing combustible materials? And also as well, we need to be looking at fast lane, which is on our doorstep. If that's what ammonium nitrate could do, what could happen? down the road.
The comparison has been made, Sam, that this was about 2,500 tons of conventional explosive, so about 2.5 kilotons of explosive force, which is well below the yield of even the smallest nuclear weapon that's held in Faslane. It's something like 194 times that amount of explosiveness in Faslane. Right next to our cities. Ken, if I could involve you in this conversation now, obviously people are going to make parallels between Faslane and this explosion. Is it fair, do you think, to look at it that way, to look at it as a way of, I suppose, making the case for nuclear disarmament as well?
It's a bit of a quantum leap, but I mean, the basic premise is that if you have dangerous materials, dangerous animals, dangerous criminals running about, you have to have a plan to contain and restrain. I mean, we have Nobel's organisation that was in Scotland many, many years ago, and even when they were working with explosives, they took precautions to ensure that there was little to no danger to the external public. Obviously, their staff had to work within specific safety conditions. But to have such a high concentration of an explosive material in a dockyard close to residential buildings just beggars belief. There's a reason. I mean, I know that health and safety guys get a lot of stick because they think there's some kind of bureaucratic meddling, but there is a reason for using common sense many times to avoid people dying just with such circumstances when it can be prevented. But it may well be that because of the financial situation of the particular country that they may be aware of it, but they couldn't do anything about it because money was not an option to.
There have certain details have emerged in the media just today. In fact, that it was a Russian ship which brought this cargo of ammonium nitrate, and it was on its way to somewhere else. But they've had to store it for the last few years, and they couldn't do it safely. Anyway, let's move on now to Hong Kong. Now, Hong Kong activists are being charged over a banned vigil on the 4th of June. 24 people in Hong Kong, including pro-democracy activist Joshua Wong, have been charged with participating in an illegal assembly at a vigil on June the 4th, commemorating the crackdown on protesters in and around Beijing's Tiananmen Square in 1989. It was the first time the vigil had been banned in a semi-autonomous Hong Kong, with police citing coronavirus restrictions on group gatherings in refusing permission for it to take place. Still, tens of thousands have lit candles across the city in what was largely a peaceful event, bar a brief skirmish with riot police in one neighbourhood. The anniversary struck an especially sensitive nerve in the former British colony this year, falling just as China prepared to introduce a national security legislation later that month in response to last year's often violent pro-democracy demonstrations. Pro-democracy activists see the new legislation as the latest attempt by Beijing to encroach on Hong Kong's freedoms. Police said in a statement on Thursday that 24 people, including 19 men and 5 women, aged between 23 and 69, had been charged with holding and knowingly taking part in an unauthorised assembly. Such a charge existed before the new security law came into force on June the 30th. Wong and at least six other activists said on their Facebook pages that they were among those charged. The June the 4th commemorations are banned in mainland China, but Hong Kong, which was promised certain freedoms when it returned to Chinese rule in 1997, such as that of expression and assembly, traditionally held the largest vigils globally every year. China has never provided a full account of the 1989 violence. The death toll given by officials days later was about 300, most of them soldiers. But rights groups and witnesses say that thousands of people may have perished. Okay, let me come to you, Ken, first of all on this. Now, this is obviously another symptom of the changing attitude of the Chinese government towards the former British colony of Hong Kong. Are they going to keep cracking down? Is this going to get worse, do you think?
I'm not an expert on Hong Kong. I have a few friends there and they see it from a different perspective. There's a politics at play. When the British signed back or handed back Hong Kong under that 99-year rule, legislation, they agreed what was happening regarding the the bringing back of Hong Kong into China rule, but they understood that they would give them some time to do so. Hong Kongers need to understand that legislation and just deal with the authorities and what is acceptable to them. So it sounds overly simplistic, but they are part of China now, and China is actually calling the shots. I think there may well be extreme people who are just trying to cause some trouble. I really don't know, but at this minute in time, I would just hope that people start talking and don't start writing as they did before, because it's one death is one death too many.
Okay, thanks for that. Sam, I know, Hong Kong's a long way away, and we've been hearing more and more about the rising tensions between China and particularly America and a trade war looming. Do you think that people of Hong Kong have largely been kind of thrown under the bus a little bit by the West and left to their own devices, or is this inevitable?
Oh, I don't know, Gordon. I really can't answer that. It's they pretty much have been kind of thrown under the bus, because Hong Kongers have always believed that they were going to have, certain freedoms, when the authority was given back to Beijing. But what's happened is total opposite, because all their freedoms, their freedom of speech, everything, their right to protest, everything is all being stopped. Especially this new security law, it is absolutely horrendous. We've seen people being arrested just for carrying flags and things. So goodness knows what's going to happen now. And in terms of trade with America and trade around the world, Beijing is going to want to control all of that. They've not stopped. This is only the beginning of what's happening with Hong Kong at the moment.
Okay. Listen, thanks for that, both of you. I think we'll move on to our next story. And now we're talking about on-site assessments, and clearance operations are continuing at the Rest and Be Thankful. Now, assessments of damage to the A83 caused by a large landslip on Tuesday are continuing today, with teams back on site since first light to carry out the clear-up of material. A large boulder, approximately 100 tonnes in size, was exposed in one of the steep channels above the A83. And a helicopter is being used to make the boulder safe by using water bags to manoeuvre it into a safe location. Overnight, around 100 tonnes of further material reached the A83 roadside via a steep channel, which had been scoured out by Tuesday evening's landslip. Teams are working to clear this, with dedicated personnel scanning the hillside for safety to check that no further material could impact on the operations below. A team of 42 people are continuing to work on both the A83 and the Old Military Road, as well to manage the traffic and to ensure a diversion route is kept moving. 16 different vehicles have been deployed by specialists to help clear the Old Military Road and the A83 and allow full investigation of the damage to the road to continue. The A83 and the Old Military Road remain closed, with a standard diversion route in place via the A83, A82, the A85 and the A819. Western Ferries has added additional sailings between Guruk and Dunoon to help accommodate motorists. Okay, let's come to you first of all, Ken, because this is a problem that recurs, isn't it? Every single year we hear of this road being buried under tons of mud. Are they ever going to get on top of this? And what is the problem about keeping this road clear?
Well, nature. Nature's a problem. We're never going to take on nature and beat nature. We can try and live as best we can. You're talking about a fierce size of mountain range there that you can't cover in 6 feet of concrete to prevent this happening. This stuff just happens. It's not a consequence of anything we're doing. It's a consequence of nature. When you get heavy rainfall, you have loose gravel on top of loose stone. Something's going to give at some point. And all the guys can do is actually just investigate it and see what they can do. Well, I mean, I know that certainly in Switzerland, say, for example, and certainly in Canada, where you have snow avalanches, when they try to prevent avalanches on ski slopes, which will do relatively little damage, they do maintain it, but we're talking about a hillside and a mountainside, which is a different kettle of fish, and stone has a higher density than snow. So I don't envy the guys in their job, and I don't know how they can best anticipate that there's going to be an avalanche such as the random nature of nature and the weather.
Well, one of the possible solutions that's been put forward, that has actually been used in Europe, is the idea of building a kind of enclosure, a gallery above the road, like putting a roof over the road, which diverts any rocks over the top, but leaves the outer edge of the road open to the elements. Is that possible? I mean, is there a reason why the Scottish government, I gather it's Bear Scotland, actually, a private company who maintains the road, is there not a strong case for capital investment in protecting that road?
Yeah, there is. I mean, obviously, you'll see even in the travels of Scotland, wire mesh being used a lot to retain some of the bigger boulders that would cause a lot of damage. I mean, small rubble travelling here for there is hardly going to cause much in the way of inconvenience to people, but it's the larger stones that are underneath the mass of the mountain that's actually doing most of the damage. It can be controlled. You just have to find the money and spend it. But when we can't find the money for carbon capture or many other worthy projects, it's just a case that you're limiting the resource to make it happen. But certainly, this is something that will happen on a regular basis, and all you can do is just try and anticipate it where you can, if you can.
Okay, thanks for that, Ken. Oh, Sam, there's a couple of things occurred to me here. I mean, obviously the powers that be who run the road system in Scotland have done a sort of cost-benefit analysis. They must think that there are not enough people living in that area to make it worthwhile doing a permanent fix. Do you think that could be the problem?
It could be one of the problems, Gordon, and unfortunately it's something I kind of disagree with, because it doesn't matter if there's a few hundred or a few thousand people that live in the area. At the end of the day, this is impacting on businesses, it's impacting on people's lives, it's impacting on the local economy. So they really need to look at something a bit more permanent, whether it's building a kind of tunnel system or a bridge system. They need to look at something, because the thing is I know they had reopened the old military road as a kind of standby, but this landslide was actually quite bad. It affected the old military road as well. So it may be worth looking towards the future and getting a more permanent structure in place, and something that's going to be kind of safe, because it is affecting the local economy up towards Dunoon and all that. I know a few businesses up there, and it's a shame. It does affect them. As much as the ferries try to accommodate, it's still not the same.
Yeah, and of course the diversions when the rest of Be Thankful is shut are enormous, aren't they? They massively take you out of your way.
They are. I mean, a few times I've done the road, up by Dalmally and right round the circle just for a day trip. Never mind having to do that in a diversion. That is just horrendous. It's okay, as I say, it's okay doing it in a day trip when you're out for just a nice wee drive. But if you are going to be out and about, but there's a lot of people that come from that neck of the woods. It come down to Dumbarton, to the supermarkets here.
Yeah.
So even just people coming for their shopping, it's just, it's a shame, and again for the local economy as well.
Okay, well listen, thank you, Sam. In our next story, actually, we're staying here in Scotland, and we're looking at Network Rail and train operators who are reminding passengers to follow public health advice as temperatures are set to soar. With temperatures set to reach the mid-30s in parts of the UK, especially in the south of England, towards the end of this week and into the weekend, the rail industry is working to keep passengers moving safely. Passengers are being asked to plan ahead and to continue to follow public health advice when travelling by rail. Wear a face covering unless you are exempt, maintain a distance from others, and travel at quieter times whenever possible. Network Rail has activated its extreme weather teams, the EWATs, at hotspots across the country. Speed restrictions may be introduced at the hottest locations to keep services running as reliably as possible in extreme heat. Train operators will have staff on hand to help and provide guidance through journey planners and social media. Rail companies are urging passengers to plan ahead and to follow public health advice, as temperatures are expected to soar from tomorrow, that's Friday, into the weekend, with many people likely to take advantage of the hot weather by going on staycations or day trips to coastal resorts. It's vital that people who use the railway for such journeys adhere to public health guidance to keep themselves and other passengers safe. Network Rail and train operators are working together to minimise disruption by having extreme weather action teams on hand to keep people moving, having staff available at stations to help passengers, and providing guidance about travelling during the hot weather through journey planners and social media. Now, Ken, this sounds like a very sensible idea, and it appears to be happening on a UK-wide basis. Do you think we're going to see the kind of temperatures that they're talking about of 30 degrees here in Scotland, though, or is it going to be a bit less of a furnace up here?
I can't even remember the last time I saw 30 degrees in Scotland. Who knows? I mean, really, who knows what you're going to get? Some areas may have little sunspots. Today I was in Kenmore just travelling back, and it was 22 degrees, which was to me just warm enough for summer in Scotland. But yeah, as soon as we get it, everybody's going to be lying out like white milk bottles on a beach trying to get some kind of sun. And human nature being what it is, there will be spikes of COVID, and there will be people moaning about being asked to queue for a bag of chips or whatever. It's just the nature of humans. But hopefully Scots are a bit smarter than the majority and realise that we're still not out of this pandemic yet, to be careful and to take care of each other and to be kind. There are some scumbags out there that just, they're all me. It doesn't care what they've been asked to do to try and help. They just want to do their own thing and they'll stop.
Okay. Sam, let's bring you in here. I mean, I don't know if you're a rail traveller yourself, but I have a friend who's a train driver, and he was telling me that 9 members of ScotRail staff have actually died from COVID-19, have caught it on the trains from passengers. I mean, surely we have to protect the staff as well.
It's horrendous what's happening. I've not used the train since this has all started, because normally what I would do is park up my car and, take a train to a lot of places, but I haven't done that. I've just been relying on my car. But what a friend of mine, her son works with ScotRail, and the stories are just horrendous of the verbal abuse they get off of passengers. And especially the last time when it was really nice weather and everybody was trying to go to Loch Lomond or go to Ayrshire and all these places, and and because he works at Glasgow Central and sometimes Glasgow Queen Street, and the abuse is just absolutely shocking from what she was telling us. It was just, there's no need for it. These people have got to do a job, and there is no need for people to be nasty. And I am absolutely dreading, as I always do, living just down the road from Loch Lomond. I dread the beautiful weather, because we become entrapped in our own village, and that's the time where we don't go anywhere near Loch Lomond. The last time during the kind of height of the pandemic, Loch Lomond was still mobbed, and the people the pictures that we've seen of people coming off the train at Balloch was absolutely terrifying. And as Ken says, you'll have people queuing up for a bag of chips and things, but also for ice cream cones and things. And it's just, a bit of common sense and, and a bit of decency, and a bit of manners as well go a long way.
Well, thank you for that, Sam. Obviously, people do need to watch their behaviour, actually, and it's just a case of human behaviour as usual. Well, our next story also involves rail travel, this time in a different way. Funding for rail freight is being trialled. The Scottish Government has allocated £195,000 to Victor Rail Freight to carry out a trial to transport timber by rail in the north of Scotland. The funding was awarded through the Scottish Strategic Rail Fund, and this is open to rail freight industry partners to table proposals for improvements which meet modal shift objectives. Following proactive and productive engagement with the timber and rail freight industry, an opportunity for this trial between Caithness and Inverness has been identified. The trial will run for 6 weeks starting this week and will operate up to 3 trains a week with the capability of moving around 6,000 tonnes of timber. This will take 250 lorries totalling 55,000 lorry miles away from Scotland's roads. Ken, very quickly, if you would, this seems like a very sensible idea to take the log trucks off the roads and put the timber on trains.
Well, I've been doing that for years at Matthew Gloag's in Perth by filling up trains with cases of whiskey to go straight to the Euro terminal. So it's nothing new, it just happens to be logs this time, which is a lower value, I'd say, per tree than it would be for a case of whiskey, which is quite expensive. So no, nothing's new under the sun. Scotland have been doing it for yonks. There are companies that do it, have railside tracks. A ferry wagon can take a lot of cargo, and it's off the road, it's safe, it's secure. It's nothing new here, really, to be honest.
Okay. Sam, do you think this is maybe the start of something changing? Do you think perhaps we're going to see more lorry journeys being removed from our roads and moving more freight by rail?
Possibly. I'm just having a giggle. I've seen one of the tweets on the screen saying about buckled rail lines. So,
yes. In the hot weather.
Yeah, in the hot weather. So the chances
the wrong kind of sunshine.
Yeah, if we're going to be starting this week, we might not be getting that. The freight, because the rail lines might be all buckled. But no, seriously, yes, I mean, it's a good way of lowering our carbon footprint and taking, these big, massive lorries off the roads. But on the negative side, that's someone's job. You know what I mean? That's the thing. It's balancing it out. That's someone else. That's someone's job. Someone is paid to drive these big trucks up and down. Yeah. But as Ken says, we've always used freight for transporting goods through Scotland. So it's just another kind of link on that. Do you know what I mean?
Of course, railways historically have played a huge role in the building of countries like America, where massive amounts of material and lumber and steel and coal were transported thousands of miles cheaply. So, good news story. I'm sorry, did you try and say something, Ken?
I was going to say, no, Kippers, the rail line up to north of Scotland, we're bringing Kippers to London Market overnight, and that was one of the benefits of having rail for the people in London.
Okay, thank you, Ken. On to our final story this evening. This time, it's taking a more sombre tone. We are remembering Hiroshima and Nagasaki. A powerful 10-minute video artwork marking the 75th anniversary of the dropping of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki has been released by the Imperial War Museum in London. The museum commissioned stage designers E.S. Devlin and Makiko Weston to make the piece, which tells the stories and explores the impact of the bombings from different perspectives. The film I Saw the World End has been posted on the museum's website. It features Devlin and Weston reading short text from a range of sources, including extracts from H.G. Wells' prophetic 1914 novel, The World Set Free, in which he imagined a bomb of terrifying power that would be dropped from aeroplanes. The 10-minute video work was due to be officially unveiled on Thursday morning on a 45-metre screen in London's Piccadilly Circus, but events in Beirut led organisers to cancel. Instead, it was first revealed on a 1-metre screen at the Imperial War Museum at 8:15 a.m. The time on the 6th of August 1945 that an atomic bomb was dropped from the Enola Gay on the city of Hiroshima. An estimated 80,000 of the city's 350,000 population were killed instantly, and by the end of the year the death toll had reached 140,000 people. Both women obviously came to the subject with very different perspectives. Devlin said that she grew up with the books of Raymond Briggs, including The Snowman and Father Christmas. And he also wrote When the Wind Blows, which tells the story of a nuclear attack in the UK. Now, a story like this obviously invites comparisons between Scotland hosting nuclear weapons, Sam, which I know you're very strongly against, and also you live fairly, actually closer to Faslane than even I do. What is your feeling about this now that we are not celebrating but commemorating this terrible act 75 years ago? Does it bring into focus the whole issue of nuclear weapons for you?
Yeah, it does. And the thing is, we to be commemorating is very important, because we can't, forget what happened. I mean, that was just a horrible, horrible atrocity, and it's beggars belief that even after that and the devastation and the lives that were lost, we still insist in having nuclear weapons. And that's what I don't get my head around, and I can't get into that mindset. And Ken stays next to just as close to Faslane as I do, and it is something we live with every day. A lot of the times it's there, and you just don't really think about it. But then when you kind of look back in history and things like this come up, and it brings it to the forefront of what would happen. And it's just absolutely no need for it. And this, to think, there's just get into that mindset of why we need it. It's just, when people say it's a deterrent, it's not a deterrent. That is a load of rubbish. At the end of the day, they are weapons of mass destruction, and they kill people. And if they're not killing people instantly, they are killing them slowly. And they're just the weapons of a mass destruction. They're called that for a reason, because they destroy everything in their path. Yeah. And it's just, it's just horrendous to think that after all these years, we still have them.
Okay, Sam, thank you. Briefly, Ken, what's your reaction to this story? This is obviously a piece of art that's been created to memorialise this event. What's your reaction to this now, as you see it from the 21st century?
Well, we ran an article from a couple of survivors from Hiroshima that came over to Helensburgh for a vigil. And when we spoke to them privately, it's very, very difficult to get your head around how any organisation or country could contemplate mutually assured destruction. So, okay, Japan didn't have nuclear weapons that could threaten the United States, but this was their way to terminate it. But it just beggars belief. I don't know what kind of level of intelligence would create such a sophisticated destructive weapon and then threaten to use it, knowing that today any one of several countries could wipe the planet out 10 times over. Yeah. Why would you get into that situation? I mean, I know we're getting involved in
Ken, what I wanted to ask you just finally before we close the show tonight is the one time a country actually invaded British soil was when Argentina took over the Falkland Islands, and Britain did not threaten to use its nuclear weapons in that situation, did it?
But they sent a nuclear sub out.
They did.
They sent a nuclear sub out, and we believe that nuclear sub came back and flew the Jolly Roger.
It was an attack submarine, Ken, was it not? And it torpedoed the General Belgrano. I don't think it carried nuclear weapons.
Well,
I may be wrong.
I'm here as well, and I can tell you there's differing stories between what's portrayed on the media that the government controls and what guys have been saying that were actually on board vessels that came back to Faslane, and I can assure you that.
Yeah, but the Belgrano was infamously torpedoed as it was supposedly leaving the exclusion zone, and it was justified later on as being a threat to the British fleet at the time. But at
Well,
no point, I
it
don't
was only
think, was
it was only
anybody
opposite.
contemplating firing a nuclear weapon at Buenos Aires or anything.
Well, I mean, we're spending 200 billion a year or whatever it is, and at no point is anybody thinking about pressing the red button. So I mean,
Yeah.
the thing is, how daft do you need to be to understand that anything that protects the United Kingdom, knowing fine well that having the power to press that red button, which we don't have, it has to be vetoed, approved by America,
Yeah.
we would get exactly the same back. There is no point in doing this. It's completely mad. Well, that's why it's called mad, mutually assured
Yeah.
destruction. So
I think
there you go.
that is probably an excellent way, actually, to sum up this particular piece of news today. Anyway, we've just about run out of time on this evening's programme, and at this time, it's usually my habit to ask you to become a supporter of Broadcasting Scotland. So if you are if you enjoy our programmes and you want to help us make more and better quality programmes, then you can become a supporter of Broadcasting Scotland by following the directions on your screen now, by going to our website, which is broadcastingscotland.scot/register, and you can follow the prompt from there. That's about it from the Thursday edition of Scotland at 7. I will be back again on Monday. In the meantime, from all of us here, from my two guests, from Ken MacDonald and from Sam Payton, a very good night to you. Good show.